Welcome to Tech London, a show featuring interviews with London's top creative entrepreneurs, startups, investors, design agencies, internet marketers, and freelancers that make up the Tech London online community, which mostly lives on the Slack instant messaging platform. We rotate through both hosts and guests for these interviews, so you have the chance to hear from multiple perspectives on London's tech scene.
Hello, folks. Welcome to another Tech London podcast. And today in our virtual studio, we have Kristel. I always say it wrong. Is it Kristel or Kristel? Or?
It's Kristel, as my mother would say it. If you're in Southeast London, the accent then sort of covers over, becomes Kristel. So I'll answer to anything.
Yeah, I can't pronounce my wife's name properly, which is a bit of an issue in our relationship. So I always mess that up. So, Kristel, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
I'm known for PR and marketing support for small business owners and SMEs. More so, I used to work in agency many moons ago, sort of 20 years ago, working on brands. And what I discovered there was that there was a lot of time, money and energy being wasted on some things in terms of PR activity, that when you're looking at how to build your brand, how to step up and be your own leader, I wanted to help business owners directly. So when I started working, I founded KV Communications 10 years ago now. Wow. And I really focused in and narrowed in, just trying to help support and nurture business owners who I know are completely frazzled, overwhelmed with marketing choices, and probably not having a clue how PR works and how to maximize its impact. And I just wanted to help provide my own style of support, really, as opposed to agency, you must work with me on a retainer. It was like, right, how can we be more flexible? How can we make sure that you know what you're spending your money on and giving you that confidence? And actually that strategy, which is also the really key element to this all, is giving them clear direction as to how to build their brand, how to communicate that messaging across their comms, and through their networks and their communities.
Because that's one of the. In fact, that's the only reason I got you here today, is because increasingly. So when people ask me about PR, I always manage to sidestep it because I'm like the email content podcast guy when it comes to that, and I've just always given PR a wide berth. And in a lot of projects we're doing now, and like with Jax I work with, we have more reasons to be entertaining PR. And I'm not just saying this to be cute, listeners. I really don't have any idea about it, because it has. You said you've been doing this for like 20 years, so that was like pre-social media. Sorry.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really know how to function in that era. What has changed, and what are the current kind of, because it's always like, oh, it's a hole you throw money down, and there's like the off chance that your mate who you've hired knows someone who can get you on the front page of the Guardian, and then that happens, and then what happens? It's like, how does it work nowadays? And I know loads of people don't know what they're doing with this.
Well, I'll tell you what hasn't changed, Bernie, is that a lot of people don't really understand what PR is, as you've just said. They don't understand the cost because they don't know how to measure it. And the reason why that has been such a problem in terms of, out of all of the marketing activity that you can do, PR is about relationships and it's about reputation. So how do you measure that? Ultimately. And we all heard how powerful word of mouth is. And a lot of people think that PR is this other thing in terms to do with media relations, but it's so much broader. And I think that's where everyone has sort of either missed a beat, or they're doing it themselves and they just don't realise. And a lot of the times, people will hire a PR because of media relations. That's what they want. And, that's not wrong. I think 94% of PR pros do some form of media relations, because I was sort of looking at the state of PR in 2021, and there was a survey by Muckrack that basically surveyed 1,600 PR professionals. And it was really interesting to see, because we wanted to see the difference. And so, to see that all of us are still doing some sort of form of media relations. It's not going away anywhere. But what I found really interesting is that I'm doing more and more strategy work, because I kind of see it as your eagle's eye, like you're looking above. If you talk about reputation, and you know how damaging bad reputation can be. And the way that I explain it is that, with marketing and social, you're out there and you're essentially broadcasting, or you're advertising yourself in some way, form or another. But the trick with PR is to get other people talking about you when you're not in the room, and sort of making sure what they're saying about you is positive. And so really, I feel that the majority of people think, well, what's the value in that? I need to make sure that, I'm driving sales. I'm actually, sort of increasing social media figures. So I'm going to do that sort of activity, but they don't realise that it's linked. So for me, it's, we've got so many more ways of communication, and getting across that message of what your company is, what it stands for. It's making sure that throughout your comms, whatever you may be doing, you are communicating that. And I look at it as that, as every business owner, you have almost 5 spheres of I would call sort of like 5 audiences, or 5 spheres of influence. So you'll always have, like, the inner sphere will always be your close connects, your teams, your friends, your family, whoever might be talking about you, supporting about you, making sure that they understand what it is that you do, what it is that you want to achieve, or what it is that your services or products will do. And then you've got, like, community, like whatever communities you're in. It could be local community, it could be sort of community and networks that you're working within, could be industry was the third that I look at. You look at shareholders and investors. They also sort of have an impact on what you need to communicate about what you're doing, how well you're doing. But then also you've got media relations and external. So you've got sort of like partnerships and like journalists that want to really amplify that messaging across to where you need to be. And so you've got all of these different audiences, like where you need to be really strong and clear about who you are, what you do, what you deliver, so that when somebody thinks, oh, I've got to think of Bernie, I think of you with podcasts, hence we're on your podcast. But for me, you're my go-to. So that's the whole point, is how do we make you the go-to? And it's where you're communicating that. And I just find it really interesting, because the way that PR has changed over the years is that, again, I was working pre-digital, so we only had like 5 main newspapers, and
a desk phone.
Yeah, and a fax, would you believe? Sending that information. And I always remember at uni, just before I started, my media sort of tutor turned around to me, the internet may impact how we work going forwards, and it couldn't have changed it any, in a way for the better, because what's happened is that whereas a lot of marketing, I think a lot of agencies just wanted to say that they did everything, so you'd see an agency that will say, well, we're also doing social media, and we're also doing PR, and we're also doing strategy, we're also doing advertising, and they're swallowing up as much as they can. But actually it's finding the experts to pull together your team to make sure as well, if one house can do it, that is amazing, that is truly amazing. But there's so many nuances in terms of making sure that we're joining the dots, as it were. So you could have the best website in the world, absolutely, but or the best piece of coverage, but if that website isn't working, it just, there's a kink in the chain there, and it's a broken link. And I've done this. We were just talking about this earlier, but I now look at it as when a client comes to me, I'm looking at the whole process. I'm looking at, okay, so even if you did want media relations, how do they connect? Like, where are we going back to? And actually, again, what I found really interesting was that, we're reporting more and more on website impact, or if the client isn't aware of it, I'm asking them, I want to see what impact that PR coverage or that PR activity had on website lift, social media lift. Did it drive sales? Are we, having an increase in inquiries? What is it that it's doing? And I'm making sure that measurement is very much in line with, to reflect what that activity objective is and what it is that we need you to do. So in a way, it's changed so much, but I think digital now has helped us put some stats, behind it to help people understand that you need the strategy. You need to see, right, where are my audiences? Like, what are the ones that we want to target? And also, where do we want to communicate so that they know us? And then what do we need them to do? And how do we then go and capture them?
So with that, when you're like, people listening to this could be sitting in their co-working space around Old Street with a couple of laptops going, right, we've got this, just got a bit of funding. And at that point, loads of people I've spoken to in the past are like, say, we need to get in front of as many people as we can. And then people like you and me say, so when you say people, what do you mean? And and it's very, I've had that myself. It's like really frustrating. It's like anyone that will give me some money because we've only got so much runway left. Where do people start? There, or what would your recommendation? And obviously, like everything's depends on whether they're selling soap or apps or experience days. But what's one of the first things you should make sure you have in place in a PR? Assuming you have a website, in a PR realm.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's understanding your audience. That will never go away. That will who's your key buyer. A lot of people don't do this. They tend to launch or go into some PR activity, and this is my sort of hair pulling moment. Is that they don't know enough about. They're not clear about themselves or their proposition. This is where branding comes in. And I don't mean a pretty logo. I mean, actually,
that was my next question. So sail into that, because let's get the brand right, and then like a year later,
man alive. We see it too often. And again, this is where a lot of people spend a lot of money. They haven't done it properly at all. But this is at the crux of what I do, because whenever I try and work with clients and they haven't done this process, it's always so hard. It's so much harder. But you look at the brand, you look at that value proposition, and we talked about like before this podcast, but Simon Sinek's why, like what it is that you're trying to do. What is that belief, that common belief? Because it is that know, like, trust factor. And you're going to, if you share those values with that brand, then, we've seen it. We've seen it like over the past 18 months. We've seen those smaller businesses do incredibly well because community was at the heart of what they did. And all of a sudden they cared about the community when it mattered. When everyone's sort of thinking about themselves, it's like, wow, this is what this shop is doing, or this company's doing, or this, business is doing. And all of a sudden we want to work with those people, not because, for any other reason, but it's got shared value. And for me, it's during those times that you're being tested, because you look at sort of your brand values, and this is the foundation of who you are and what you do. And if you're able to communicate that, you're going to be tested along the way. Like, it's just going to happen. And this is where, again, the PR head comes in, and you've got issues management, you've got crisis PR, and it might not even be your fault. If it is your fault, then, you weren't true to those values in the first place, or you were just downright lying. But for me, it's making sure that when it hits the fan, people know that, they'll forgive a mistake rather than a lie, if you know what I mean. So again, when you're looking at that branding and you're looking at who you are, what you're doing, and how you're communicating that, how you're showing up, you're stepping up to be a leader. Whatever it is you're doing. This is why I think branding and how you communicate that through your marketing and your PR and your comms, it steps you up to be a leader. And actually, everyone tries to jump ahead. If you're doing it in the spheres that I talked about, instead of trying to jump ahead and just get that media relations and that double page spread and it's all going to change everything, you will find that those journalists will come to you.
So let me shout out here before we go too far. Is that I want to jump back to the values thing? Is who would you, like, if you arrived at mega tech who've just started? How do they come up with their values? Because I fall out with people all the time about this. They're like, oh well, we should just copy some off the internet, or the marketing department should do them, or loads of different ways. But like that kind of vision and values thing, and I'm certainly not suggesting people spend 6 months on a mountaintop in Brazil coming up with them, because I don't think that's a good use of time. as fun as it may be. But where do you find those?
This is why I love working with business owners, because, it's why they started. It's inherently inside of them. Like, what is it that they were trying to do? And a lot of them, I mean, we all know this. A lot of people are in business because, it's like, right, I can see it as the next big thing, and we've just got to push forward. Then that isn't a value-driven business. So accept it, but there'll be a reason you're doing what you're doing. And I'm just going to take the example of the businesses that I work with, because I see it and I recognise it, and I want to work with them because I'm inspired by them. But a lot of them, like, even if you're a tech company, and I had this with a client, I absolutely adored what they were doing, because as it turns out, they'd worked in the hospitality industry, and they saw how hard it was for sort of chefs to go out there and start their own business. So it's like, right, how do we help them make the side income to build up their audience and actually make some money? So they did a direct, like, chef to consumer, chef at home service tech platform. And the whole point was that it's super easy. You go on the platform and you sort of key in like what you want, and it matches you up with a chef in your area, and from everything to enthusiastic cook right up to like Michelin starred chef, if there's one in your area. And it was amazing. But I asked them, I said, like, what is it, why are you doing this? And it's like, because I love the chef community and I really want them to succeed. And I find it criminal that, you have to have all of this money up front, and what if you fail? Whereas you can do it in a much more progressive way, a much more creative way and flexible way. And all of a sudden you've really understood that he cared for that community. And I think community for him was really key. And that was one of his key values, and I think that supportive community drive that they had as a company, it was just so apparent in what they did. And it was easier then. I mean, when I talk to, and again, that's a platform, it's a tech platform. And there'll be a reason why you're doing something, because a lot of these apps are trying to solve a problem. Well, what is the problem they're trying to solve, and why is it important to you? Talk about that. Talk about those values. Bring it up front. Make it relevant to that consumer. It's not about you and you trying to find the next best thing. It's how you're trying to solve a problem or deal with an issue.
Yeah, just before we go, what is because this is how we ended up doing this podcast, which we haven't talked about, is that kind of, I know, the advantage of having a community or an audience, like build something in Copyblogger that I've followed for years and years, is about building your audience, and rather than trying to find people to sell to. And there's a thing about and Rob Fitzpatrick here. Do you know this book called The Mum Test?
No, I've not heard this one.
He
adding that one to my list.
it's I know it's a must. I hate saying it's a must read for any startup. So basically says, and you alluded to this earlier, is like people don't know their audience or their target market enough. And he gives an example, but we'll put a link in the show notes to the YouTube video about this. So he gives the example as you go to your mum and say, oh, you got an iPad, do you want a recipe app? And she likes you and she says, oh yes, that would be great. But then when you dig a bit harder, it's like, so mum, I noticed you have an iPad, where do you get your recipes from? And she goes, oh, well, I don't really get any recipes anymore. I just swap recipes with my friends. I've got a lot of cookbooks, and at my age, I'm not really looking for another lasagna recipe. And it's like, so what do you do on your iPad? And she goes, oh, I just do email and look at Facebook. So do you research on it? No, I don't research on it. I read newspapers. And then you find out how she actually uses the iPad. So you don't go and make a recipe app for your mother. And a lot of companies, like from Basecamp to Evernote, have like made things that worked, and then they've gone back to their original thing of being like a note taker and a project tool. And it's it's very tempting to add things into the picture that aren't needed because you don't know what it is. But if you have an audience, you can ask the audience, if anyone remembers that TV show.
Yeah.
So can you just finish on a bit about? I might have said it already by saying that, actually. Sorry, Kristel, but about building that community and audience rather than just like hammering people for sales.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's why one of the top like skills that PRs sort of like can deliver as well is helping with that social media content. Not so much, like obviously there's social media specialists and strategists, absolutely, but I think there is that tone in some of the posts that maybe even a social media can have a PR head on them. But like you say, it is making sure that you're using social media for like your testing, your researching, and you're asking the questions, not just broadcasting to them and building that community, making it fun and engaging, but also like again, we watched this with social. A lot of people thought, oh well, I'll just go on and post, and then they forgot all about the engagement. And again, these algorithms love the engagement, even as the companies have evolved, their algorithms are making it harder for you to broadcast. But for me, with you've got your social media following, you've got your networking, your groups. If you at first start to be there to build them up individually before you perhaps open up yours, or if you're able to, then it's great to open these things up and invite people, but they must know why. But I genuinely believe that I'm a big fan of community. I'm a big fan of connection and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve, and getting them to work together. And like you say, it's not asking for anything. So we've talked a lot about collaboration over competition. So when they're joining that community, they know that they're in a safe space. They know they have those shared values, and you're not necessarily asking, if you are selling something, then it's in balance with the value that you're giving within that community. That value needs to be up front. And I think that's why you build that know, like, and trust factor, that you can't fake that. And I think that's why it's so important to build that community around you and pull them in, because you have your website, absolutely, but you also need to, when you're attracting people in, or whatever it is that, if you have the app, your downloads or whatever, you have this gold content, you have this gold audience, but you have to do something with them, and you have to develop, again, going back to PR, that relationship and building up your reputation for you to be that leader.
That I think it was Bob Berg, which is like in a lot of people listening to this, he that's like referencing Paul McCartney as a new musician. He said that, like, people will do business with people they know, like, and trust. And I've heard really old people and really new people just riff on that all the time. Yeah, and I think
I quote him on my website. I totally believe that. Yeah.
It is. That's always happened, and the trust thing is like higher than ever after the way people relate to mainstream media, politicians, and how we've all come together in the pandemicness we've experienced. So where can we'll put some links in the show notes, but just shout out where people can find you online, Kristel.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously you've got a website, kvcoms.com. I also do a weekly I'd call it a live stream, going to YouTube, Facebook, called Small Business Chat, where we talk about small business issues, really. It's like 30 minutes once a week, different themes, different guests. And it's really designed to inspire and empower and sort of like help small business owners get from A to B. And that is on YouTube. And yeah, you can find us on all of the socials, which I shall provide links for.
All the socials. Are you still clubhousing?
I'm not anymore, actually. I've got to say, we were doing a great hour session, but I think my love is Small Business Chat, and actually it got to the point where I can't produce 2 shows, 2 different platforms. It is so much work, and I always believe that, I think there was a brilliant quote that I heard from a content expert. I think it was Phil Pallen that introduced me to this, but he said, instead of being, everywhere instead of being on 10 platforms, be a rock star on 3. And, for me, it was like, I had to look at the audience that I was doing. I'm active on LinkedIn, and that to me was right. I really enjoy Clubhouse. I think it's a great medium. But yeah, I'm on Small Business Chat. Has my heart.
I had to not get involved in Clubhouse, and in the co-working space I'm in Ilford, they do a show every morning called I think it's Breakfast with Winners.
Oh, I see that. Yeah.
5,000 people come. So the other, like, opposite my office,
Yeah.
there's like 4 guys streaming to 5,000 people every weekday. It's like the Radio 1 breakfast show, and we have people coming in here to like appear on it and stuff like that. It's amazing, and I know it's a bit like living in Nashville when you like country music, but that's it. Anyway, I've started ramping again. Thank you very much for your time and attention, folks. Go to techlondon.io and just give us a shout in the Slack if there's anything. If you've got any great guests and anything you'd like to know, we're in there. Look for Bernie J. Mitchell. Thanks for your time today, Kristel. Thanks very much, Tech London. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Tech London Show. If you're interested in joining the community or even making an appearance on this show, make sure you join our Slack group over at techlondon.io. Till next time.